I was in the middle of a client presentation when my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor. "Police are at your house with Emma. Your mother called them." My 5-year-old daughter was supposed to be safely with my family while I worked. When I found out why they really called the cops on her, I packed our bags that same night and disappeared. They haven't seen us since, and after what I discovered, they never will again. It was supposed to be a simple Tuesday in Millbrook Valley, just like every other Tuesday for the past 8 months. The routine was clockwork: drop Emma off at my mom's house on Thornfield Avenue, drive 43 minutes through the winding mountain roads to my marketing job in downtown Clearwater Springs. Present whatever campaign needed presenting, handle client calls, and pick up my daughter by 6 o'clock sharp. Normal, predictable, safe. My mother, Vivian Caldwell, had been watching Emma every Tuesday and Thursday since my divorce was finalized last October. It was the arrangement that made everything work in my carefully reconstructed life. I could focus on rebuilding my career at Henderson and Associates marketing without worrying about childcare costs that would eat half my salary. Emma got quality time with her grandmother in the big house where I'd grown up, with its sprawling backyard and the old oak tree that still held the rope swing my father had hung when I was 7. And Vivian got to feel useful and needed after her retirement from teaching, something she'd struggled with since stepping down from 30 years at Millbrook Elementary. It seemed like a win-win-win situation. God, was I naive? I should have seen the signs earlier, but when you're a newly single mother trying to keep your head above water, you don't look gift horses in the mouth. You're just grateful that someone, anyone, is willing to help, especially when that someone is your own mother, who raised 3 daughters and always seemed to have everything under control. Vivian had volunteered for the babysitting duty the week after my divorce papers were signed. "Rebecca, darling," she'd said, using that particular tone that meant she'd already made up her mind. "You can't possibly afford proper childcare on your salary. Emma should be with family. She needs stability right now, not some stranger in a daycare center with 12 other children competing for attention." At the time, it felt like a lifeline. I was drowning in legal fees, trying to find a new apartment that Emma and I could afford on one income, and learning how to navigate single parenthood while maintaining my performance at work. The Henderson account alone required at least 50 hours a week, and that was just one of my clients. Having reliable, free childcare from someone who genuinely loved Emma felt like the universe finally throwing me a break. Emma seemed to love it too at first. She'd chatter excitedly in the car about what she and Grandma Vivian would do that day. Would they bake cookies? Would they work in the garden? Would they watch the old Disney movies that Vivian kept on VHS because she claimed they were better quality than the digital versions? My mother had always been particular about quality. Everything in her house was either antique, expensive, or both. The furniture was real wood, never particle board. The china was fine porcelain, never everyday dinnerware. The books were hardcover classics, never paperback contemporary novels. She'd raised my sisters and me with the understanding that there was a right way and a wrong way to do everything, and the right way usually involved more effort, more money, and more attention to detail than most people were willing to invest. "Standards, Rebecca," she'd say whenever I'd suggest cutting corners on anything. "If you don't maintain standards, everything falls apart." I'd inherited some of that perfectionism, though not to her degree. I kept my apartment clean but not spotless. I dressed professionally but didn't spend a fortune on clothes. I cooked healthy meals but wasn't above ordering pizza on particularly exhausting evenings. It was a balance that worked for me and Emma. But I could tell it sometimes frustrated my mother during our Tuesday and Thursday handoffs. "Emma had chicken nuggets for lunch yesterday," she'd ask, not quite accusingly but with enough disapproval in her voice to make me feel defensive. "They were the organic kind from Whole Foods," I'd reply, already knowing it wouldn't matter. "Homemade is always better, darling. You know that." These little comments had become more frequent over the past few months, but I'd written them off as typical mother-daughter tension. Vivian had opinions about everything, from my parenting choices to my apartment decor to my decision to keep my married name even after the divorce. She meant well, I told myself. She was just trying to help in her own particular way. Besides, Emma never complained about spending time with her grandmother. If anything, she seemed to prefer Vivian's house to our small two-bedroom apartment. There was more space to run around, more interesting things to explore, and Vivian's undivided attention for hours at a time. What 5-year-old wouldn't love that? That Tuesday morning started exactly like all the others. I woke up at 6:15, made coffee, got Emma dressed in her favorite purple leggings and the unicorn t-shirt she'd begged for at Target the week before. We had breakfast together, scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy but nutritious enough to satisfy both my budget and my conscience. Emma was chattering about a dream she'd had involving talking horses and ice cream castles while I packed her overnight bag. She'd started staying overnight at Vivian's house once a month, usually when I had early morning meetings or late client dinners. It was another arrangement that seemed to benefit everyone. Emma got a fun sleepover with Grandma, and I got the flexibility to handle work demands without constantly watching the clock. "Mommy, do you think Grandma will let me help make bread today?" Emma asked, bouncing slightly in her booster seat. "She said last time that maybe I was getting old enough to learn." "I'm sure she will, sweetheart. You're getting very responsible." "I am responsible. I remembered to brush my teeth without you reminding me." "You did. I'm very proud of you." The drive to Vivian's house took exactly 27 minutes door-to-door, winding through the residential areas of Millbrook Valley and up into the hills where the older, larger homes sat on multi-acre lots. My mother's house was a pristine colonial revival that she and my father had bought in 1987. Back when my dad's accounting practice was thriving and before property values in the area went completely insane. It was the kind of house that appeared in local real estate magazines as an example of classic mountain elegance, with its white clapboard siding, black shutters, and perfectly manicured landscaping. Vivian was waiting on the front porch when we pulled into the circular driveway, just like always. She was dressed in her typical Tuesday outfit, pressed khaki slacks, a crisp white blouse, and a light cardigan that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in 3 months. Her silver hair was styled in the same neat bob she'd worn for the past decade, and her makeup was flawless despite the early hour. "There's my beautiful granddaughter," she called out as Emma unbuckled herself and ran up the front steps. "Are you ready for a fun day with Grandma?" "Yes. Are we going to make bread?" "We certainly are. I thought we'd make dinner rolls to go with the roast chicken I'm preparing for dinner." I followed Emma up the steps, carrying her overnight bag and the small cooler containing her lunch and snacks. Vivian preferred to cook elaborate meals for Emma rather than rely on the simple sandwiches and fruit that I usually packed, but I'd learned to bring backup food just in case Emma's appetite didn't match her grandmother's culinary ambitions. "How are you feeling about the presentation today?" Vivian asked as she ushered us into the foyer. The house smelled like lemon polish and lavender, the same way it had throughout my childhood. "Nervous but prepared. The Henderson account is our biggest client, so there's a lot riding on this quarterly review. I'm sure you'll do wonderfully. You've always been so capable when you put your mind to something." It was a compliment wrapped in a slight backhanded observation about my general life choices, but I was too focused on the day ahead to analyze it. I hugged Emma goodbye, grabbed my coffee travel mug from the car, and headed toward Clearwater Springs with 40 minutes to spare before my 10 a.m. meeting. The drive between Millbrook Valley and Clearwater Springs was one of the most beautiful commutes in the state, according to the tourism brochures. The road wound through dense forests of pine and oak, past small lakes that reflected the mountains like mirrors, and through Henderson and Associates occupied the top 2 floors of the only high-rise building in downtown Clearwater Springs, which meant it was all of 8 stories tall. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the surrounding mountains, and the conference room where I'd be presenting was designed to impress clients with both the scenery and the agency's success. I arrived at 9:15, gave myself a quick appearance check in the lobby bathroom, and spent the remaining time reviewing my notes one final time. The Henderson account represented about 40% of the agency's total revenue, and they were notoriously demanding clients who expected perfect execution and innovative strategies for every campaign. Today's presentation covered the performance metrics for their summer tourism campaign, along with recommendations for the upcoming fall festival promotion. I'd spent weeks preparing for this meeting, analyzing data, creating charts and graphs, and developing creative concepts that would showcase both our agency's capabilities and the unique appeal of the Clearwater Springs region. The presentation was loaded onto my laptop, backed up on a flash drive, and printed in full color just in case technology failed at the worst possible moment, at 9:55. I walked into the conference room where 3 Henderson executives were already seated, reviewing their own materials and making small talk about weekend plans. James Henderson III, the company's president and grandson of the founder, was a man in his late 50s who demanded excellence but respected competence. His marketing director, Caroline Walsh, was brilliant but had a reputation for asking impossibly detailed questions that could derail even the most prepared presenter. The third person was David Kim, their newest account supervisor, who seemed friendly enough but was still an unknown quantity in terms of his expectations and preferences. "Good morning, everyone," I said, setting up my laptop and arranging my printed materials. "I hope you're all ready to see some impressive results from our summer campaign." "We're looking forward to it," James replied. "Caroline has some specific questions about the digital engagement metrics, and David is curious about our social media strategy moving forward." "Perfect. I've prepared comprehensive data on both topics." I launched into the presentation, starting with an overview of the campaign objectives and moving through the performance data point by point. The summer tourism campaign had exceeded expectations in almost every category. Website traffic was up 37% compared to the previous year. Social media engagement had increased by 52%, and most importantly, actual tourism revenue was up 28% over the same period last year. The clients were nodding approvingly as I clicked through slides showing demographic breakdowns, geographic distribution of visitors, and seasonal spending patterns. Caroline was taking notes, which was usually a good sign, and David was asking thoughtful questions about our attribution methodology. I was 20 minutes into the presentation, feeling confident and hitting all the key points I'd rehearsed, when my phone started buzzing on the table beside my laptop. I'd forgotten to switch it to silent mode, but I ignored it and continued explaining our recommendations for the fall festival campaign. The phone buzzed again. Then again. "I'm sorry," I said, glancing quickly at the screen. "Let me just turn this off." But the display made my stomach clench. 3 missed calls from my neighbor Jessica Martinez, whose number I recognized immediately. Jessica was a retired teacher who lived in the house directly across the street from my apartment. We'd become friendly over the past year, partly because she was one of the few people in the neighborhood who was home during the day, and partly because she'd taken a genuine interest in Emma's well-being. After my divorce, Jessica wasn't the type of person who called during work hours unless something was seriously wrong. I switched the phone to silent and tried to refocus on the presentation, but my concentration was shattered. I stumbled through the next few slides, my mind racing through possibilities. Had there been an accident at my mother's house? Had Emma gotten hurt? But if something had happened to Emma, wouldn't Vivian be the one calling me, not Jessica? "I'm sorry," I said again, pausing mid-sentence during my explanation of target demographic expansion. "Could you excuse me for just one moment? I think there might be an emergency." James looked concerned rather than annoyed. "Of course. Take your time." I stepped into the hallway and checked my messages. One text from Jessica, sent 3 minutes earlier. "Police are at your house with Emma. Your mother called them." My vision went blurry around the edges. I read the message 3 times, but the words didn't make sense. Police at my house with Emma. How was Emma at my house when she was supposed to be with my mother 43 minutes away? And why would Vivian call the police about anything involving my daughter? I called Jessica back with shaking hands. She answered on the first ring. "Rebecca, thank God. I don't know what's happening, but there are 2 patrol cars in your driveway right now. I saw your mother drive up about an hour ago with Emma." And then maybe 20 minutes later the police showed up. Is Emma okay? Is she hurt? She looks fine physically, but she's sitting on your front steps with one of the officers, and she looks scared, really scared. Your mother is talking to the other officers. And she seems, Jessica paused, she seems really concerned. About something. This doesn't look like a misunderstanding, Rebecca. My legs felt weak. What do you mean, concerned? I mean she's talking to them like she's reporting something serious. She has papers in her hand, and she keeps pointing at your house and then at Emma. I couldn't hear what she's saying from this distance, but her body language. This isn't someone who accidentally triggered a welfare check. The conference room felt like it was 1,000 miles away. I'm leaving work now. Can you keep an eye on things until I get there? Of course. But Rebecca, you should probably call a lawyer or something. This doesn't look good. I hung up and stood in the hallway for a moment, trying to process what I'd just heard. My mother had driven to my house with Emma instead of staying at her own house as planned. Then she'd called the police about something that apparently required to patrol cars and official reports, and Emma was sitting on my front steps, scared. While Vivian discussed whatever she thought was wrong with my parenting or my home, I walked back into the conference room on autopilot. I'm extremely sorry, but I have a family emergency that requires my immediate attention. Could we possibly reschedule this presentation for later this week? Of course, Jane said. Immediately. Is everything all right? I hope so. I'll call this afternoon to reschedule once I know more. I gathered my materials, shut down my laptop, and made it to my car before the panic really set in. The 43-minute drive back to Millbrook Valley felt like the longest journey of my life. I tried calling my mother 6 times during the drive. Every call went straight to voicemail. I called my sister Monica, who lived 3 blocks from Vivian's house and might have some insight into what was happening. Straight to voicemail. I even tried my father's cell phone, though he kept it turned off most of the time and rarely answered calls from anyone except his golf buddies. Nothing. By the time I reached the residential area where my apartment complex was located, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely stare. I could see the police cars from 2 blocks away, 2 black and white patrol vehicles parked in front of my building. Their presence making the quiet neighborhood look like a crime scene. Jessica was waiting on my front porch, and Emma was in her arms. My daughter's face was red and puffy from crying. Her unicorn t-shirt wrinkled and stained with what looked like tears and possibly snot. The moment she saw my car pull into the driveway, she started sobbing all over again. "Mommy," she wailed as I ran toward the porch. "Mommy, I want to go home." I took Emma from Jessica's arms and held her tight, feeling her small body shaking against my chest. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. What happened? Are you hurt? Grandma said I was bad." Emma whispered between sobs. "She said you didn't want me anymore and that's why the police had to come. She said I was going to live somewhere else now." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Jessica over Emma's head, and her expression confirmed that she'd heard the same thing. "Where's my mother now?" I asked. "She left about 10 minutes ago." She talked to the officers for almost an hour, then handed them some papers and drove away. "The police said they needed to wait for you to get home," one of the officers, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, approached. "You ask carefully. Are you Rebecca Caldwell?" "Yes." "What's going on? Why was my daughter brought to my house when she was supposed to be with her grandmother?" "Ma'am, we received a call from your mother expressing concerns about your living situation and your daughter's welfare. She requested that we conduct a welfare check and speak with you about some allegations she's made." "What kind of allegations?" The officer glanced at Emma, who was still clinging to me like her life depended on it. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately. Is there somewhere your daughter could wait with your neighbor while we talk?" Jessica immediately stepped forward. "Emma, would you like to come see the new puzzle I got? It has horses on it." Emma looked at me uncertainly. I kissed the top of her head and tried to keep my voice calm and reassuring. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go with Miss Jessica for a few minutes while I talk to the police officers. I'll be right here, and then we'll go inside and have some lunch together. Promise you won't leave, I promise." "I'm not going anywhere." Jessica took Emma's hand and led her across the street to her house, chattering about the horse puzzle and whether Emma wanted some apple juice. Once they were out of earshot, I turned back to the officer. "What exactly did my mother tell you?" The officer consulted her notepad. She reported concerns about unsafe living conditions, inadequate supervision, and potential neglect. She provided photographs and what she described as evidence of your inability to properly care for your daughter. Photographs of what? Pictures of your apartment that she says demonstrate unsafe conditions. She also made allegations about your work schedule, leaving your daughter unsupervised for extended period. I felt like I was falling through the floor. "Officer, I work full-time, but Emma is never unsupervised. She's either with me, or she's with my mother during my work hours, or she's at preschool. She's never alone. Your mother claims that you frequently leave your daughter unattended while you work late or attend social events. That's not true. I haven't been to a social event since my divorce 8 months ago, and I've never left Emma alone. She's 5 years old. I wouldn't leave her alone for 5 minutes, let alone for hours." The officer made notes as I spoke. She also provided photographs that she says show dangerous conditions in your apartment. "Can I see these photographs?" The officer hesitated, then showed me several printed photos that I recognized as pictures of my apartment, but they looked wrong. The first photo showed Emma's bedroom, but it looked like a tornado had hit it. Clothes were scattered everywhere, toys were broken and strewn across the floor, and there were what appeared to be food containers and dirty dishes on every surface. I stared at the photo in disbelief. This isn't what my apartment looks like. I mean, yes, that's Emma's room, but it doesn't look like this. Someone made this mess specifically to take this picture. The second photo showed my kitchen, but again, it was in a state of complete chaos. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink and on the counters. The floor appeared to be covered with crumbs and spills, and the garbage can was overflowing with trash. "Officer, this is not how I maintain my home. Someone deliberately trashed these rooms to make them look unsafe. Who would have access to your apartment to do something like that?" The answer hit me like a truck. "My mother has a key. I gave her a spare key in case of emergencies." The third photo showed Emma sitting on her bed in the messy room, looking sad and unkempt. Her hair was tangled, her clothes were dirty, and she appeared to be holding a piece of bread or something similar, as if that was the only food available to her. "When was this picture taken?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "According to your mother, these were taken this morning when she arrived to pick up your daughter for the day." I looked at the timestamp on the photos. They were taken at 8:47 a.m., less than 2 hours after I'd dropped Emma off at Vivian's house in her clean clothes and neatly braided hair. "Officer, this is impossible. I dropped Emma off at my mother's house at 7:15 this morning. These pictures were supposedly taken at my apartment at 8:47. But Emma was with my mother at her house during that time." The officer frowned and consulted her notes again. "Your mother said she came to your apartment this morning to pick up your daughter and found these conditions. That's not true. I drove Emma to my mother's house myself. I can prove it. My neighbor Jessica saw me leave with Emma this morning, and my mother was waiting for us on her front porch." "So you're saying your mother is lying about the circumstances of these photographs?" I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts despite the panic and rage fighting for control of my brain. I'm saying that someone deliberately made those messes in my apartment and staged those photos to make it look like I'm neglecting my daughter, and the only person who has access to my apartment when I'm not here is my mother." "That's a serious accusation, ma'am. It's the only explanation that makes sense. Emma was with my mother all morning. She was never at my apartment in these conditions." The officer looked at her partner, who had been listening to our conversation while taking his own notes. "We'll need to inspect the apartment now to see the current conditions, of course. But I think you'll find that it looks nothing like those photographs." And I was right. When we walked through my apartment 15 minutes later, it was exactly as I'd left it that morning, clean, organized, and safe. Emma's room was tidy, with her bed made and her toys neatly arranged on the shelves. The kitchen was clean except for the coffee mug I'd left in the sink that morning. There was no evidence of the chaos depicted in the photographs. This is very different from what we saw in the images, the officer admitted. Because someone cleaned up the messes they made specifically for those photos. But even as I said it, I realized how crazy it sounded. What mother would deliberately sabotage her own daughter's living situation? What grandmother would stage fake evidence of neglect involving her own granddaughter? The answer was starting to become terrifyingly clear. A mother who wanted custody of her granddaughter and who was willing to destroy her own daughter's life to get it. The officers documented everything, photographed my clean apartment, and took my statement, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. Why would a grandmother fabricate evidence against her own daughter? It seemed impossible. Even to me. After they left, I sat Emma down and gently asked what had happened that morning. Through her tears and hiccups, a disturbing picture emerged. Grandma said we had to go to your house to get special papers, Emma whispered, but when we got there, she told me to sit in the car and wait. She went inside for a really long time. How long? Sweetheart, I counted to 103 times. Maybe more. I got scared because she said we were just getting papers fast. My stomach turned. Vivian had spent at least 30 minutes in my apartment, alone, doing God knows what. Then what happened? She came back and said we had to go inside together. But when we went in, everything was messy and yucky. She said you must have been too busy to clean up, and that made her very sad. Did you see Grandma make any of the mess? Emma shook her head. She said it was already like that. But Mommy, I remembered putting my toys away yesterday like you taught me. They weren't on the floor when we left this morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Vivian's calculated plan, using her key to trash my apartment, stage photographs, and then manipulate Emma into appearing in them as evidence. The woman who had raised me, who claimed to love Emma more than anything, had traumatized my daughter to serve her own agenda. But what was that agenda, exactly? What did she hope to gain?